I could only be attributed those ideas in so much as that my idea was how do I bring this group of talented creative people together and help make their vision happen.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And I am joined today by former Asmodee employee, now Plaid Hat Games owner, Colby Dauch. Welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, hey, former Asmodee, dude. Like, this is big news. This is the shock of the century. Was it a big shock to you?
Yeah, it was a pretty big shock. The opportunity came up.
How long has this been in the cards? Because, like, this news is coming at a time in which Asmodee is kind of having some issues, so to speak, from the outside. You know, you're hearing about layoffs, and then, of course, there's the, let's generously say, controversial return policy on, like, item replacement and that kind of stuff. So a lot of people could speculate that this is, like, Plaid Hat jumping ship in some way, like you had an out and you found a way to take it. Has this been something in the works for a long while, or is this like an opportunity that just came up?
It's a fairly recent opportunity. I mean, these things don't happen overnight, so it's been in the works for a few months, but it wasn't predicated on any one of those like events as far as that goes.
And how does it feel? Like, is it a relief right now? Is it scary?
It is scary and exciting. I don't know that I would call it a relief, but because it's pretty adrenaline fueled. It's we've been getting a lot of support, a lot of people saying a lot of nice things, so that feels good. And it just feels good to be able to like be ourselves and do us the way we want to do us, kind of without any oversight. That feels good. Well, but at the same time, there's obviously, financial risk there, and there's concern about, what's the overall health of the board game industry, and is this the right time to be going independent?
Well, I know you're an entrepreneur, and you're someone who wants to be creative. You don't want to be stuck in a rut. And I actually had been thinking for a while, like ever since the original sale to Z-Man Games, that's where it started, right? And then Z-Man ended up
F2Z Entertainment, yeah, which
right.
is Z-Man and Philosophia.
Yeah.
But yes.
And then Asmodee comes in and now owns that company, which of course includes you.
And then PAI comes in and takes over Asmodee.
Yeah.
There's another bigger fish there in the story.
There's always a bigger fish. It seems like. But I kind of figured, is Colby going to stick around and do this, or is he going to be like, man, I'm itching for that like small business ownership and start a brand new company that's under your strict creative purview and hire in your own team there. I know that the Plaid Hat team, even under Asmodee and PAI, had the people that you had worked with forever, but were you at any point considering striking off and doing your own thing during those years in which you were not a business owner?
I mean, towards the end, like it was among the possibilities of things that I could do. For the most part, I can't say that I ever strongly felt that way. Like my focus was, I have a task in front of me. It's make Plaid Hat the best it can be in whatever structure I'm in, and I was trying my best to do that. The more I felt like I wasn't doing a good job of that, the more, I'm looking at options for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, I was just like, man, Colby's not going to like working for the man. That was my position. But, you did some really great work while you were there. And it seemed like, at least from the outside, the people that I got to talk to throughout the time in which you were not an indie studio, it seemed like the people you worked with really still loved working at Plaid Hat Games. But this has got to be like a really bittersweet time for you, because as cool as it is that you get to go back to this indie status, and be in this exciting world of getting to call a lot of shots again. You're having to say goodbye to a lot of IPs, and then also Isaac Vega, who has been one of your key designers and heads of game development for ages now. Is there a weirdness to you to have to let go of those characters that you've really held on to for so long? I mean, I have a Colin stuffy right there. I have the Kodiak Colby card from Dead of Winter. You're having to say goodbye to a lot of your life there, man.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't not make those things just because they're with another studio. True. So it's, it's still part of our history. It is a shame because, those were definitely the evergreens that we made that had helped us, find stable footing. But I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't have faith we could do that again with some new games. I think it is harder now than it was when we started to make an evergreen.
Why?
Well, there's so much competition out there, and there's just a lot going on that's vying for people's attention. It's harder for one game to get to the critical mass that it really needs to spread by word of mouth and get to the point where it feels like an evergreen, or even for somebody to take the time with one product long enough to really fall in love with that one product, because it's just always what's next.
Yeah, well, it almost seems like in order for a smaller indie studio such as yourself to really get some momentum, you kind of have to tap into the Kickstarter model. Not always. Do you think that we might see Plaid Hat Games hit Kickstarter in the future?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to rule it out, but it's not among the current plans as far as what to do. It's not something that we have to rely on right now.
Mm-hmm. Is there a part of you that feels like, man, I don't want to have to go to Kickstarter? Like, we're an established name. Like, somehow that would be compromising an ideal of what you think Kickstarter should be used for, maybe for smaller names in the board game biz.
There's a little bit of that, but I think that if we had a project that was like, experimental enough, or maybe over the top enough, like if we were doing Dark Tower, that makes sense as a Kickstarter. Something that's just maybe like, is this something that people want, or this is like going to require all this production, and so we need to make sure that enough people are bought in to do this project.
When you're doing Seafall's second edition, you might be like, let's gauge interest on this.
Yeah. So that might require something like Kickstarter or benefit from it. Or, you might be right. We might end up deciding like, hey, this is where indie studios thrive, and this is where people who are interested in these studios do their shopping, and so this is where we should be. I don't know. For right now, we're going the path that we're currently going down, because I've also heard all sorts of horror stories about trying to run a Kickstarter. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I try to think back to when you guys were first starting out, because I was an avid listener to your guys' podcast back in the day. I think you had released Summoner Wars. Like, for my own experience, I picked up Summoner Wars at Juneau Rubber Stamp here in Southeast Alaska, because the owner is a big board game fan. He was like, what if I have a side hustle? Like, I have my notary stamps that I make for people, but I also have like some board games in here. And I don't know that was working out as well as he wanted it to. And so he had some deep discounts, and I go in and I pick up like, what's this Summoner Wars thing? I think inside there was an advertisement for coming soon Mice and Mystics or something like that. And I was way into this idea. I was like, who are these Plaid Hat Games guys? And what is this Mice and Mystics, like, storytelling adventure? You were kind of building it as like this story thing, not just dungeon crawl. So I was way into the idea, being a big Redwall fan, being someone who's interested in unique tabletop games, and the storytelling aspect I didn't feel like was really driven in box tabletop games at the time. Now it's everywhere. It's pervasive. So I had followed you guys for quite some time, and one thing that always struck me is that it always seemed like you wanted to do things your own way. Like starting out with you doing Summoner Wars, and now you striking out on your own again. And even though so many companies now exist that didn't exist when you were doing that, or at least not in the same state, Leader Games, Cephalofair doing Gloomhaven, and Grey Fox Games, these big indie companies that are utilizing Kickstarter, I kind of always envisioned that you would find a way to do things your own way. So I'm actually kind of relieved that right now Kickstarter isn't necessarily the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of fun to with the podcast and just in general how we approach things, to just be really open and approachable with our customers, and just try to let our personality shift through in the things that we're doing and the ways that we communicate them. And it's hard to do that inside of a larger organization, for any variety of reasons. It's just, you have to, you can't talk about things too early. Just doing a podcast, you're always at risk of talking about something that could be construed as, internal information that shouldn't be released. And, even when we thought we were doing innocent stuff to like keep the podcast alive, like we were doing a playthrough of the Star Wars role-playing game that FFG had released.
Right.
And we just thought like, oh, this is another way just for us to keep putting kind of ourselves out there, but we're also like promoting our sister company's game. And then, got a call from licensing about, you can't be doing this. Like if Star Wars was to find out and they weren't to like it for some reason, it would risk our deal. And it was like, okay, well, we can't really operate the way we used to operate. There's too many things at play that we can't anticipate.
That is wild. Let's take stock of what Plaid Hat Games is now. So how many employees is Plaid Hat Games?
Right now there's only 6 of us remaining. Hey, I kind of got off on a sidetrack on your earlier question and did not address the bigger point. So like losing our IPs was one thing. It's not. I think it's a bigger blow for Jerry than anybody else. But the bigger loss there was definitely Isaac. He was the first employee besides myself. He was really there from early on. We really, kind of grew up together in this business. And so that was really hard to hear that, that he wouldn't be a part of it moving forward. But it's something that he knew was right for him.
Right.
So I really couldn't force my agenda in it yet, or in that regard. Like I had tried to convince him, and it was clear that he knew what he wanted in that he wanted something different. And I think he's still trying to discover what that is.
I'm not there with you, but I always observed like it felt like there was a real intimacy between the two of you. And like you said, growing up together, I mean, listening to that podcast, of course, you heard you guys kind of develop your own interest in games. And I remember when Isaac first came on, he was like, I hate Euro games. And, he was talking about the games that he likes and doesn't. And like every game that he played was a new experience. And you could, in rapid succession, see his own taste develop. And therefore that kind of translated into greater skills as a designer. But it almost felt like the way that you guys joked with each other, the way you talked with each other, it really challenged each other's ideals. I remember when I had Isaac on the Cardboard Herald, somehow we got on the subject of trying to tell stories, trying to be very personal and open about your own experiences. And then that ended up leading to him coming out. And I remember him talking about one of the hardest things that he ever had to do was coming out to you. You know, this was like my brother, and it was my employer, and it was my friend.
It's true. It was really memorable for me too, and kind of the fuller picture there is that before I did anything with games, I worked for a church.
Right.
And it's a very like evangelical fundamentalist church. So there's definitely some ideas in the church around like being gay is a sin.
Right.
And he knew that because his mom had gone to the same church. And so there was some history there, even with how his mom was at first with him.
Right.
And so that's a big part of where the fear lied, right? So we had built this relationship and started to build this, business together, and I was asking him to come on full time.
Right.
And so he had felt like it was important that he address this before agreeing to come on full time, because, he thought that I could have, ended up reacting, like some of his family who was into that same, sphere of influence.
Right.
But it ended up being a really positive experience, because for me, my immediate, it was just like a snap change of mindset for me. Like my immediate realization was that the things that I had been told, the way I had been taught to feel about this, was wrong. That my conscience in the moment was right, and it was to love and accept him for who he is, for the experience he, for who he is, who he's saying he is, and that experience for him, and I had some questions and stuff, because I, very sheltered as far as like who I know, and just from where I grew up, and being kind of, you end up in a bubble with when you work for the, your church. But it was just, it ended up being very easy for me to recognize what was right in the situation. And that ended up being a very positive growing experience for me.
Yeah. And I think that reflects in how you kind of evolved as a creator, as a director at Plaid Hat Games. Like, to me, having something like, say, Comanauts, which is a game that deals with some really, really challenging concepts that I think are meant to challenge the player, and cause you to think about, how do you feel about someone and their morality and their actions that they take? Can you be a good person and still do some really bad things? Can you be a bad person who has done some really benevolent things? And that isn't necessarily a translation of what I view the impact on you this conversation was, but more so the exploration, Colby. And maybe you've always been that, and that just kind of busted your world open. But it seemed like anytime that I talk to you for a podcast, or I read a blog entry, or I watch a video or something, you became more hungry for like new experiences and learning more about people and their unique experiences and perspectives. Inclusion became such an important aspect to Plaid Hat Games. Like it seems like whatever that experience was kind of became the blueprint for what you wanted the ideals of Plaid Hat Games to be.
Yeah, most of those ideas don't spring from me. Most of those ideas, and maybe it's because I was sheltered or whatever, but I can only be attributed those ideas in so much as that my idea was, how do I bring this group of talented, creative people together and help make their vision happen?
Yeah, you're facilitating, man. That's a big part of it.
That's why you see like a Comanauts, and part of it is also challenging, the group, because as you do more and more games, I was really getting to the point where I just felt like we were just adding more games to an ever-growing stack of games that was just everywhere, just more games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, trying to dive deeper and bring some meaning to the things that we were producing, I think became a studio goal. But, as far as like diversity, that was a big push and something that was really important to Isaac. And so it just became part of our culture just through his influence. And will be forever imprinted on us and forever be something that is important to us as a result. And Jerry's deeper look for meaning through storytelling and through evoking critical thinking about the world we live in through storytelling. Those are all things that really are born in him, and then the rest of us catch that bug and get excited about those things and build each other up in that way.
Well, before we talk about like the future of what games you're going to be coming out with, because I know you have some exciting things that you're going to be getting to, but what is the Plaid Hat brand at this point? Like, what games do you have that you intend to continue production? I know we've all seen the list of like, these are the games that Asmodee will continue producing and will be moved over to Z-Man, I think, or at least some of those games are. But like, what are the games that you are ready to start production, or maybe you got existing stock of that you plan to keep in rotation?
Well, I mean, we're not destroying any stock at this point.
Yeah, so, totally.
So, anything that we still have, obviously we're gonna keep supporting. But the newer things that we have, Quirky Circuits, which is a game by Nikki Valens, and it's this game that's just so brilliant, and like it's so easy to get into, and each thing like just kind of keeps layering and introducing and making your brain think in new ways. It's such a great puzzle game. It feels a little bit to me like the first time that I played Portal.
Okay, yeah,
where it's like it keeps turning ideas on its head as you go, and just keeps building on stuff that you've discovered as you go or learn from, in a really clever additive way. So I loved that from the first time I played it. We managed to keep that in the deal. Abomination or Frankenstein is still ours, and that's I feel like that game has has the story, it has the gameplay, it has the theme that's all evocative of Plaid Hat. So I'm excited about that one. And we'll keep pushing on that one. And then there are a number of back catalogs that we get to. FFG will be supporting Dead of Winter. Z-Man gets the Adventure Book game series, plus Mice and Mystics. And they, except for Comanauts, we're keeping Comanauts.
Do you still get to call it an adventure book game?
For as long as the current print run is in print, I believe. Either way, it's an adventure book game for now. Yeah.
Right.
We're doing a little bit of old and new as we move forward. Of course, right now we keep the Crossroads brand. Right now we're pitching Forgotten Waters, which is our next Crossroad game, that Isaac Vega was the lead designer on, and he also obviously did Dead of Winter. So, and we're trying to be really innovative with it in a way that I felt like Mice and Mystics was innovative. So at the time you mentioned like Mice and Mystics, there weren't a lot of like story-heavy, story-centric games. And so with Forgotten Waters, we're really looking like, okay, where do we take this idea of story to the next level? And so we've got this app integration, and we're going to have fully voice-acted casts, doing the voiceover for these different parts. And it's very much in the flavor of Plaid Hat, like our personality shows through, our humor shows through in this game. So really excited about that. And then I am currently working on a Summoner War 2nd edition, which is where some of the roots and the classic comes in. That's something that I want to probably release early next year. And then, of course, we kept Jerry. So we might not have kept like his biggest properties, but we kept Jerry. So Jerry's working on the next whimsical, captivating, beloved adventure game. We are working on kind of a new system in which to house Jerry's ideas and connect them one to the other.
Yeah, well, we got to figure out where it goes, man. I mean, we explored fatherhood, we explored the study of self and like self-worth, and then we also explored like environmental issues and the impact that we have in the aftermath.
Commercialism, I think, is a big part of Aftermath.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's going to come next? Like that, dude. I could just sit at Jerry's feet and listen to him talk about ideas and musings for hours. That dude has an amazing brain and a gift for translating it into board game mechanics.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you more because it would make you giddy just to hear the pitch, because it's so good. But these things take us a while to develop, so I don't want to kind of like put our stuff out there and get excitement before we can really show it off. We want to ride that crest of excitement into the release, ideally.
Right. Well, I want to get to Forgotten Waters, but let's end the transition period talk here with like what was day one? The first day where you get up and you're like, well, I'm my own boss again. All right, team, what do we need to do here?
Well, the day one of I'm my own boss again was still pretty quiet because the internet didn't know, the world didn't know I was my own boss yet. So there's some definite like I'm getting payroll around, I'm getting insurance figured out. There's a lot of that kind of rebuilding a company stuff happening. But mostly like the work was focused around Forgotten Waters. We were still bringing Forgotten Waters, working on the app. We're still working on like all the launch material, marketing material, and stuff like that, as well as wrapping on the expansion for Stuffed Fables that's going to come out from Z-Man and getting that all ready to just send off. So the excitement really started like with, okay, now we have the final approved press release and releasing that. And then, day one of that is just total bombardment. It's just like inbox and messages everywhere, a lot of well wishes, a lot of really high feelings. And it felt really good because I was really hoping that like, man, like I really want to go independent and really recapture some of that indie spirit that we had, and maybe just maybe like people will be with us on this, and like and some of our kind of our cred will come back that we used to have, our street cred. And it totally like it was overwhelming how quickly people were ready to contact us and reach out and want to work together or just offer their congratulations.
It's really shocking to see that because, you don't see that. You see in all sorts of aspects of business and creative business where the big guy swallows up the little guy, right? And then suddenly the little guy gets to go back to being the little guy again. I mean, you took some losses. You definitely took some losses. But you didn't have to start over as a new company and then have all of the former Plaid Hat crew quit and then start again as some proxy of what you were doing in the past. Like there is a kind of underdog success story. Well, TBD success story, because of course you have to succeed at this point on your own. But
right.
Even that little victory, I think, is meaningful for a lot of people. And that's an important narrative. And getting the good PR boost at the time that FFG and Asmodee were getting slammed over the component return policy, and to have someone on Reddit go, hey, look, there's a component return policy or replacement policy on Plaid Hat Games, where they're like, yeah, we'll replace your components. And everyone's like, yeah, stick it to the man. You're no longer part of Asmodee.
Yeah, I don't know how much I could say about that, but you know, the replacement part policy came that decision got handed down after I already knew that we were headed towards independence. So um, that was a fight that I didn't have to have.
How long did your staff know that you were heading towards independence? Like, did you have to wait until the ink was dry to tell even, the people that you've been working with for the longest time, or did they know that something might happen?
There were layers to it. I let in Isaac and Jerry to begin with because those
Right.
are, those were the ones that um, hey, I'm like, we have different options here. This stuff is going on. Like, what do we want to do? And here are all of the graphs and charts that I've drawn up of what these kind of different projections might look like. Um, and then it was concentric circles from there. Uh, Eventually, letting the entire staff know what was going on. And there was a period there where I knew that without our big mainstays, I was going to have to let some of the staff go, but I couldn't tell them yet because it had to line up with other things that were happening with the organization as a larger whole. So that was a really rough time to know what was coming. Our Christmas party came during that time.
Oh
And
man.
it was like, oh my God, it was the most miserable party I've ever been at. Like nobody there knew, like everybody was having fun, but it's just like, man, I know that these people that I've created a life with are gonna be left having to go and find something else.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about the future. So this new game, it's a new Crossroads game. Like, what do you even define a Crossroads game as now? Because I feel like if I had asked you, what, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whenever Dead of Winter came out, you would have a very different answer. So what does Crossroads game mean to you in 2020?
Yeah, I would have had a different answer, I think. I did in fact have a different answer when Forgotten Waters was being developed. Um, but a lot of the other staff here, pushed back on it and wanted to expand and change what Crossroads meant, and and basically what it comes down to is just the idea that it's going to be story heavy and it's going to have these moments of decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and you make these thematic decisions that are going to have effect on the game. Those are the crossroads events, and here they happen in the app, and they'll happen all throughout it, where you'll get a bit of story and you'll be able to make some kind of thematic decision and see where that gets you. So it's as simple as that. It's just kind of a branding thing. This is a Plaid Hat story game where you're going to be making some cool thematic decisions throughout.
So the nutshell of Forgotten Waters, I mean, it's a very Pirates of Dark Water vibe going here for people who love their very, very limited run 90s cartoons. But, what is the nutshell of the game and how does it differentiate from what people might expect either from Dead of Winter or Gen 7? Gen 7? Gen 7.
Gen 7. So it's more story heavy than A Dead of Winter. It's very adventurous. You're traveling around a map. You'll discover islands. You'll be on these different objectives, and as you go, you'll come across things you weren't expecting. You'll go to locations, and locations will have like a layout of the different things you can do there, and doing them will sometimes lead to story bits and story moments that progress the story. But in general, it is more approachable than either of those games. It's definitely something that you could pick right up with new gamers. Like basically all they need to know is like, hey, what sounds fun to do? Do that. And then they start to get like, oh, and by doing things, I got these skills, and and I want my skills to go this way because that gets me these things that add to my story, and oh, these are what treasures do, and it very much has an easy ramp to it, and a very fun, almost it's like a party role playing game to some extent.
Okay, I love that description. Cooperative, competitive, semi-cooperative.
Semi cooperative, I'd say that you're all trying to get one goal, finish the campaign, but your own story, your own epilogue is really dependent on how well you did, how many stars you got, and those stars are based on filling out these stars in your constellation. How full can you get it, and those can be by burying treasure, right? So you're leaving behind, this hidden loot that you can go back to later, and then just evolving yourself as a character, getting skills and that match your character type and stuff like that. And so there's definitely a lot of that's what's best for the party, but I'm trying to get that legendary status.
Of course, I care about you guys, but I don't care about you as much as I care about getting that sword right now.
Yeah, and we definitely say if you get less than 3 stars, you lost. If you get 3 stars or more, you've won. If you get 4 stars, so that's a culmination of multiple stars, and then you get these big event things.
Right.
If you get 4 of those, then you get legendary status, which is and each one of them results in an epilogue being read at the end. So if you lose, your epilogue is just about how miserable your life goes on to be. If you get the good ending, it's it's pretty good. And then if you get the legendary, it's just how badass you are. And so it feels really rewarding.
And is this something that has to be played in a campaign mode, or can you just play a session?
No, there's no campaign. There's no campaign to the game at all.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood you then. I thought you said get through the campaign earlier. So this is a single session game.
Yes. Yeah. Well, many games can be split into 2 sessions.
Okay.
So there are different scenarios, and we suggest you play one scenario first because it kind of sets up the world. And then each scenario has a save point approximately halfway through, and there's just an easy way where you track everything and you can put it all away, and then you can come back to it later, and then the app takes you through previously on, and get you up to speed on what you had done last time, and then you continue the adventure. And in that way, you're either playing for an hour and a half, 2 hours, or 3-4 hours, depending on whether you want to take that break in between. And then, but the scenarios don't need to be played in order or anything like that. And then each scenario, there's high replay value to, because we did this thing with the app where there are a number of entries, right, that you jump over to what we were calling just behind the scenes generic entries. So they're entries that would work for any one of the campaigns, because they're just more about that location you're in and stuff like that. And the app knows if you've already experienced one of those before, and it goes to the next one. So we wrote multiple entries for each entry. So that way, as you're replaying, you never know what you're going to get out of a certain thing, even if you've been there before, even if you made that choice before.
That's something that can only realistically be done with an app, and that's what I love about app integration in games, is when it elevates it to something that couldn't at all be done in the past. Because that's an experience with Dead of Winter. When you played Dead of Winter 20 times or 30 times, you're going to be like, oh yep, here's this story again. Here we're going to have to kick the family out, or we're going to have to let them in and then have all this happen. You kind of become accustomed to some of those things. So having it evolve is probably one of the best selling points that I can think of for the game. That's really cool. It does require an app though, right? There's no playing this without one.
It does require an app. It was how we were able to get the game at $60 and also do those neat things like, improved playability.
You just lost all hipster board game cred right there.
Yeah, I
Everything
know.
that you were going for just went out the window. Now, I love apps in the games, and anyone who's like, I will never play an app integrated game.
It works with everything. If your device has a web browser, it works with it. So it's also, it's
But 30 years from now, Colby, 30 years from now, am I going to be able to play this with my kids and grandkids? That's the important question.
my understanding is yes, because it is built off of web-based platforms. So it is not like your native apps
Right.
where it's going to where the phone developer is constantly making stuff obsolete. So my understanding is yes, that this was just like you can go back to old web pages, super old
Right,
web
right.
pages.
What I always tell people who bring up that argument of like, well, what if they don't support it anymore? Well, one, if we're still around in 30 years, then great. That's fantastic on its own. But if it's something that's cool, and even most uncool stuff, someone's preserving it. Like, think of all the
Yeah.
video games that are out there that, maybe aren't being published through a legit channel, and the publisher might prefer that it's not being released out there, but someone's got it. Like if I want to play, Forgotten Waters or Journeys in Middle Earth or, any other game 30 years from now, chances are someone has hacked it to work on modern equipment and it exists. And if it doesn't exist, then there's probably much bigger problems because then I'm wondering, do I exist? So I think we got that covered.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we especially put some attention towards having it, having it so that it is here for the long term, that it is not high maintenance,
Right, right.
and doesn't just quickly fall out of supportability. But we're also very customer focused, so if it came to the demand from the consumers, like, hey, I want a printable version, we can always make a printable version, or do a bound version or something at some
Right, right.
point, when the game gets to a certain level of popularity. But also by doing it on the app, it lets us go back in later, add more of those generic entries to continue to keep it fresh for everybody, add new scenarios to continue to keep it fresh for everybody. We are working on an open world campaign, as we call it. So like after you through all the scenarios, you could switch over to open world mode, and it's a little more free form, and discovery oriented, and it kind of takes out the bigger story moments from the scenarios that you've heard before.
Right.
So we definitely want to make the app pull its weight. I didn't like when apps first started to be involved in games, it always seemed like you could almost take away the board game part and the game was still there.
Sure,
It
sure,
was
sure,
all
sure.
it was all riding on the app, or the app was just completely ancillary and wasn't actually integrated into the experience.
Right.
So,
Well,
but this was one where I really fought to see that there was an app, because there's a real value in it.
speaking of apps and games, so you're returning to Summoner Wars, which on its own is super cool. I mean, I gotta imagine there's a certain feeling of like, I never thought I'd be back here again.
Yeah.
Starting out, I'm figuring out, I'm a game designer and I'm going to be doing Summoner Wars, which is cool. Like there's this circular nature to the whole thing that feels, if we could get lofty, a little poetic. But one of the things about Summoner Wars is that I know for a lot of people, they ended up feeling like this is better as an app. This app is incredible. Like, this is so addictive and so fun and so well made. This is how I want to play Summoner Wars all the time. And, I'm sure there was still a community of really dedicated people who wanted more of the physical Summoner Wars. But, like, what do you bring to that game? Like, what do you make in a second edition? Like, do you have any kind of ballpark aspirations for what that game can be while still maintaining true to the first edition?
Yeah, I mean, I've already started to I mean, I'm already quite a ways into the developing of it, and we'll see once I start bringing on outside play testers. But everybody I've tested with, kind of inside directly one-on-one, have really felt like it feels like Summoner Wars, but it resolves a number of cracks that Summoner Wars showed when it got up to kind of the upper echelons of competitiveness.
Which, of course, you and I play at. Like, we
Exactly.
are like elite 360 no scope. We are like super top of the line.
Yeah, if that's were true, maybe those cracks wouldn't be there. But yeah, there was just some, there were some things that were complained about, but there were also some like real issues, like with it. There was an inevitability problem. So, there could be stalemates because your best move would be to do nothing for long periods. So,
right.
So they're solving some of those bigger issues, and then solving smaller issues, and then just doing some different things to just to turn some things a little. Like it was really hard to play a common heavy game because of course each common turns into a magic for your opponent, and I've tooling around with ways to make more balance between what kind of units you can play, whether it's just as valid to throw out commons as it is to wait and save up for champions, and deck building is going to become much more of a thing. So the top tier stuff is being taken care of, but also the entry level stuff I want to take better care of. I don't want the game to ever get to a point again that it kind of got to where powers really kind of got too wordy and confusing. The older you got and the game got, and you're trying to find new mechanics in there and everything, and so I'm really trying to design it with simplicity of wording in mind, and trying to do a bunch of decks at once so that there's a really good ecosystem that's prepared for and predicted and tested, rather than kind of taking them as they release.
You going with the set box model where you have a box and that's going to have a bunch of decks in it?
We'll go with a set box, but then we'll have a bunch of decks that are in playtesting at the same time as the first set box that then we'll release over time, but we will have had the opportunity to develop them all together, which leads to less edge cases, which leads to less rules bloat as you try to explain edge cases, because you've already discovered them in testing and worked out the wording to work.
Same factions?
There will be some of the same. You'll see a lot of the same factions, but doing stuff differently with them. Some like taking, stuff from all over the faction and making one deck that feels very much like that faction, more over the top than like I'm really pushing for like, this is more Tundra Orcs than has ever been Tundra Orc. Like
this is the Tundra Orc to end all Tundra Orcs. All other Tundra Orcs don't even know what to do these days.
Right. So Tundra Orcs are all about just like big and brutes that just go wild and rely on luck. Like, how do I make them feel more like that than ever? I want to make everything like feel broken the first time you touch it, like too powerful. It's all too powerful.
I love that in games. Like, do you love that?
And that everything else is too powerful too.
Like I know there are some people that I'll play games with, and like Root is really susceptible to this, where someone will sit down for the first time and they'll look at a faction board and be like, oh, that's so broken, and I'll be like, I trust in the people who created this, and what makes me feel excited about it is that it feels like it's probably broken, but to know that it probably isn't. And finding that balance is really important, and if it truly is broken, then that can absolutely wreck games. But I love when something feels so shockingly powerful that you kind of just laugh when it happens in front of you.
Yeah, so there's some of that, and some of that gets reined in through the playtesting process.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm in the design process now, so I'm always kind of lean that way. But I'm doing some of that, and I want to solve balance. You're like, well, let's not, maybe we don't have to nerf here. Maybe we could just make everything super glorious.
Yeah, well, that's also another direction to go.
So there's some of that, and then there'll be new factions as well. So stuff you haven't seen before.
Can we get the names on any of them?
Well, I don't have. I only have like, holder names, but there's like, I'm doing something with the deck building. That's each of the factions each of the summoners has 3 build symbols, and there's one that is like a common symbol between everybody, and its theme is kind of like martial prowess. It's just like ability to wage combat.
Right.
So like the Tundra Orcs, their other one is primal, and then their last one is water, which is where their ice comes in, know. And so like we'll have the polar dwarves, and they they're ice and engineering, and just things like that, where it's still it's building off of like these 2 elements come together to form something, and then continues to build off of the idea that there's elves, there's orcs, there's goblins, there's all these fantasy mainstays, but like, what if the elves were from the jungle and were primal in nature, and like just different stuff like that to try to take the fantasy tropes and either deliver on them in some cases and give a twist to them in other cases.
Now that I'm thinking about it, a polar dwarf just sounds like a short Santa Claus, but I mean, that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of polar dwarf, I think of like a big frost-encrusted beard, a big axe riding on the back of a polar bear into battle. Like that's what a polar dwarf means to me. But I like the Tundra Orcs did this stuff with ice walls, right? And when I was re-examining this thing the second time through, and I'm like, man, walls really, like, they were the guild dwarfs things, and they really feel more like a dwarf thing because it ties into engineering, which, fantasy historical tropes seems to be the dwarves area of expertise. And so, that's kind of where the frost dwarves or polar dwarves came from, was the idea that I could take some of those Tundra Orc wall things and spin that off into a different faction.
And is this a continuation of the story of Summoner Wars? Because you have a fiction, you have a universe here.
Yeah, not at all. I've had a little bit of that of fans wanting that, but this is kind of a like start fresh take on everything. Now some of those things are going to come back in. Obviously, like inspiration for old characters is going to come from those old characters, but we're just, new artists and new direction. And so I'll probably take it back to like, it's a total reboot back to, rather than building on the fiction that we released over time, because all of that like exists on like corners of the internet and stuff where you can't really expect the new player to know it or dive in on it.
Well, I am so happy for you, Colby, and so happy for Plaid Hat Games, and this has been an absolute blast to have you back on to the show and talk to you in your element as a creative entrepreneur running a business. So congratulations.
Thanks
man.
So much. Thank you so much.
When's Forgotten Waters going to hit the stores?
Forgotten Waters releases April 10th, and will be in stores then, as well as we will have your pre-orders to you by then too.
Be sure to check that out online, and be sure to stay tuned to Plaid Hat Games. Thanks again for coming on to the show, Colby.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.